The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to Training Camp Confidential, day number 9 of training camp with the Washington Commanders. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Day 9 of training camp took place yesterday on Sunday. I was unavailable Sunday, got home a little bit later than I thought I was going to, and I was just exhausted. So I figured they don't have practice today, so it wasn't much of a rush. Today's going to be a day full of content here on the channel. This will be one of 2 live streams you will get regarding our Washington Commanders. I talked about wanting to talk about the roster itself heading into those joint practices. We had a video that I posted last week talking about the roster, and a lot of you had some great comments. I mean, some excellent posts about your perspective on this roster and what you think ultimately is going to happen. And I wanted to react to some of those things, and we'll do that later on tonight. So I will be back again talking Washington Commanders football on a live stream later on this evening. So hopefully you can join me for that one as well. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about this team and what we think ultimately is going to happen tonight with the roster as we head into these joint practices, the first of 2. We got the Jets coming up, preseason game number 1, which is on Saturday. So a lot going on this week, but we had a practice on Sunday. Saturday, let's go back a bit in the timeline. So Saturday, they had practice as well, but it was not open to the media. It was and we had talked about this earlier in the week when head coach Dan Quinn had talked about how the next block of practices were going to go. Remember, the first 2 blocks had been 3 practice blocks featuring, then there was a day off, and then they got back after it for 3 days, and then there was a day off. This block was 4 days on and then a day off, but the 3rd day was what they called a mock practice, a mock game, if you will. We'll get into that. That was discussed at the top of DQ's presser. So we'll get into that a little bit more specifically as to what that entails, what they got, what they did. But that was not, the media was not available for that particular practice. So because the media was not allowed to be in on that practice, there wasn't a lot of reporting. So it really didn't count as far as like they weren't out in pads or anything. It was a walkthrough. And I had told you guys that on Friday last week that it was more of a walkthrough. So it was a little bit more specifics going on. Don't want the media involved. Don't want them seeing all of that stuff, which you totally get. So there was nothing really to talk about on Saturday, which was kind of advantageous for me because I wasn't in the office. Then they had practice yesterday. There was a signing. In order to have a signing, there needs to be a release in conjunction with that signing. So we're going to talk about that because another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust. Another one of those Rivera draft picks no longer here. Surprise. Nobody's surprised by that, but there'll be more Rivera bloodshed before this is all said and done. We've had plenty of Rivera bloodshed, and there is still more to come. There will be several of those guys that were drafted, including guys that were drafted potentially as early as last year that will not be on this roster this year, which that's still like it's one thing if it's a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, but to have potentially a 4th and a 3rd round pick from the year prior not make the team, even though there's a new regime in-house and they've turned over this roster significantly, that is still very unusual by NFL standards. If a guy is drafted in day 2 of a draft or the first pick of day 3, which is usually in the 4th round, generally those guys, even if a new staff comes in, there's this expectation that, hey, this guy should be able to help. Let's see what he can do. We'll give him a year in our system. If it doesn't work, then you look to maybe move on from him thereafter. There are guys that weren't going to make this team last year. We've talked about that, and probably aren't going to make the team this year. Now, will those guys be kept around in a practice squad capacity? Maybe. And I think there's a realistic possibility that they'll continue to work with some of these guys. But some of these guys are going to flat out get cut. And they won't be here in any capacity, including a practice squad capacity. And we saw yet another guy get trimmed off before we even got to the first preseason game. So clearly they do not value him or what he brings to the table. I was never a big fan of his, but he did help on special teams. So there was that. But we'll talk more about that as we get into the specifics. As a matter of fact, let's start there because we're going to get into camp. Day number 9 in practice. We'll start with practice. We heard from one player and, of course, head coach Dan Quinn. That one player happened to be one of the more important players, Jayden Daniels. So we'll talk about what the quarterback had to say. Still has not been officially named QB1. I think that is on the horizon. I would like to say that either it's going to happen after the first preseason game or after the second preseason game. Somewhere in that window, he's going to be officially named the starter for the regular season. And then we're off and we're running, and that conversation can kind of go away because we already know. And as Dan Quinn said, it's not a secret what they're doing. So it's not like they're trying to hide the fact that he's going to be the starter. It's just they have a process that they want to go through. We're going to go through that process, and we're not going to skip any steps. So this is all a part of the process. They're going to continue to go through the process the way that they've set it up. And hopefully everything goes well. Hey, Miss Perry. Hey, Miss P is back. We missed you. I was getting worried. I was about to hit you up on social media. I was like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? I'm so glad to see that you're back, Miss Perry. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. So, day number 9 of training camp was Kids Day. So, players brought their kids out to the practice field. Not that you need Kids Day to do that. A lot of the players do that anyway. But it was really a big day for the fans to bring the kids out. Sign autographs, that sort of thing. So Kids Day was really, really significant day for fans that are of a certain age. So that was one of the themes. They've had a bunch of different themes during camp for the last maybe 2 or 3 years now. They've been doing the kind of themed camp days. This year was a little bit different in that they had like specific days, and maybe they did this last year. I can't remember. Like, club level, fans only, this type of business, fans, season ticket holders only, that sort of thing. I don't know if they've done that. Maybe they did it last year or the year before that. Does it feel like that was the case? But and then they had they always do the military, appreciation day. They did that last week. And now they did Kids Day, and I know they've done that in the past as well. So they had the themed days. They continue to do that. And they did that yesterday with the kids, which is always great to have the little ones get involved, get their, jersey or, football signed or whatever. Like Jayden Daniels said in his press conference, you never know whose day you're going to make. And also, you never know how that's going to impact somebody. I remember Mike Daniel, the head coach of the Dolphins, talking about how, being at Denver Broncos practice as a kid and ultimately getting, some of the players' autograph made him want to be involved in football. It changed his life drastically because it altered the way he saw the game of football. He knew he wanted to be a part of it after having that experience. So you just never know how you're going to impact somebody. So I love when they are doing things like that. But in any event, the first order of business was the Commanders. I told you, it seems like every time they have some sort of an off day, we still have some sort of news. And so even though it wasn't an off day for the players and coaching staff, technically on Saturday, they did have some news, even though they practiced, but the media was not there. The Commanders signed defensive tackle Taylor Stallworth. In doing that, you have to, again, there has to be a release in conjunction with that signing to keep the roster at 90 men. So they released cornerback Christian Holmes. Another one of those Rivera draft picks. So another one bites the dust in terms of Rivera draft picks no longer. Now, he was a 7th round pick. And I told you when Dan Quinn and company first got here, the signings were going to tell us a lot about how they felt about certain positions. And one of the positions that they signed the most players at was cornerback. When they came in here, they signed 3 corners. They signed James Pierre, they signed Noah Igbenogany, and they signed Michael Davis in conjunction with drafting Mike Sainristil. So that's 4 new corners. Now, all of them won't make the roster because you already had Emmanuel Forbes here, Benjamin St. Juste already here as well. However, that told you a lot about how they felt about the position overall and, how much work they felt like needed to be done at the position. So that did not bode well for the guys that were already here at the position because they essentially were telling you that we don't believe the position is up to par right now, and we're going to do everything that we can to get the position where we feel like it needs to be for us to compete at a high level. So at the end of the day, the cornerback position was one of the worst positions on the team. We got cooked in the secondary last year. It was laughable what our secondary looked like from a coverage standpoint, from a tackling standpoint, from a discipline standpoint. We gave up the most big plays in the NFL last year. We gave up the most 40-point performances last year. Some of that was due to the offense and the lack of its ability to score, possess the ball, not throw pick sixes, fumble the ball, and have it scoop for a pick, scoop and score, that sort of thing. We gave up a bunch of offensive touchdowns, to the defense last year as well. But the defense was atrocious. And a huge part of that was we didn't get pressure on the quarterback. Those go hand in hand, pressure in the secondary play. But the secondary was awful too, right? So Christian Holmes, just another in the long line of Ron Rivera picks that have failed epically, who are being sent packing one by one. And again, they are not done getting rid of the Rivera guys here in Washington. Christian Holmes does not even make it to the first preseason game. He's gone for a guy that won't be here when the season starts in Taylor Stallworth, who's essentially being brought in to take some of the wear and tear off of Johnny Newton and John Allen in camp. I would compare this signing of Taylor Stallworth to the team bringing in a camp arm. Like, hey, we don't want, Kirk Cousins to be out here throwing a whole bunch of passes in camp. He's a, 9-10-year veteran. And we don't want our backup quarterback taking a ton of reps too. We want him taking a lot of the reps, but we want to take some off his plate too. So let's bring in another camp arm to help us out. That sort of thing. That's what this feels like. So if you're getting cut for a guy that is being brought in to help with load management for a couple of other players, you know that you were pretty far down on the totem pole, right? Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the rest of practice from yesterday. Andrew Wiley was out of teams. Not a surprise. This is something that has been happening with him due to tightness, which has been an ongoing theme for him. At some point, they probably just need to sit his ass down, right? And just say, hey, rest a couple of days. And like yesterday, he probably could have just sat out of practice completely, but they had him do individual work, and they felt like that wasn't going to really put him in jeopardy to, further aggravate the tightness, and then so be it. But he did not participate in the 11-on-11 team drills yesterday, which opened up a spot at right tackle. In past practices, way early in camp, we would have been like, oh, this is an opportunity for Brandon Coleman to get into the first team. He's already locked in at left tackle, so that left a glaring hole at right tackle. Who did they fill it with? Come back to that. Sam Cosmi, interestingly enough, was not at practice on Sunday. We did not get, because DQ does his press conferences prior to practice, we didn't get official word as to why he wasn't at practice. I don't think anything, seriously wrong, but he was not at practice on Sunday. Maybe it was, something family related and he had to go handle something, or I don't think he's injured, but I don't know, right? So I'm sure we'll get clarification on his status moving forward whenever the next practice is for the team. And because we know they're going to be leaving for New Jersey here shortly. So I don't even know when the next practice is. I don't know what the schedule looks like. I guess we'll get some kind of information as to, when the joint practices are. In my mind's eye, it's Wednesday, Thursday, because you have a game on Saturday, right? So my guess would be that the joint practices would be Wednesday, Thursday. You take a day off on Friday, and then you play the preseason game on Saturday. That's how I'm kind of thinking they're going to go about it, but I could be wrong, right? The joint practices, for all I know, could be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, right? So, or Tuesday, take a day off, Wednesday, get after it again Thursday, and then take a day off and then play the game on Saturday. I don't know. Normally, the joint practices are in consecutive days. I would think Wednesday, Thursday makes the most sense, but we'll see, right? So no Sam Cosmi, left a glaring hole on the first team unit at right guard. So no right tackle, no right guard. Who do they fill those spots with? Again, these are the types of things that really fascinate me, because these types of things tell a story. It doesn't tell the entire story, because a guy like Trent Scott, who knows, how they view him, but they, want to see him with the first group, want to see how he did in this opportunity. So they threw him out there at right tackle. He got the first team reps at right tackle, and Michael Dieter took the first team reps at right guard. Remember, Dieter was taking first team reps at left guard earlier last week when they were shuffling around the deck, when Nick Allegretti was going to center with the second team so they could see if he could do both guard and center. So Dieter took first team reps there. So again, Michael Dieter showcasing, and I think this is why they did what they did, specifically with Scott and with Dieter, is because they want to see these guys, because if we're going to keep you on the roster, you need to be able to play multiple positions. Dieter has already showcased the ability to play left guard in practice with the first team offense. We know he can play center. That's probably his most natural position. And now we're going to give him a look-see at right guard to make sure that he can play all three interior spots. Meanwhile, Trenton Scott is a guy that is going to have, swing tackle ability, much like Cornelius Lucas. If we're going to keep 4 tackles on the roster, you better be able to play both left and right tackle. We know Cornelius Lucas can play both. He's already done that in camp, both at left and right tackle with the first team offense. Trenton Scott getting an opportunity now to showcase what he can do on the right side. So he got those reps in practice with all of the guys being out. Emmanuel Forbes Jr. wrapped up the one-on-ones on Sunday with a PBU against De'Ami Brown. So, I feel like it is my duty, or everyone's duty out there, with Emmanuel Forbes in particular, to report when he's doing something, right, when he's making a play. Because every time Terry catches a deep ball, who is it on? It's on Emmanuel Forbes Jr., and it gives him a bad rap, like he's always getting beat in camp, and that's not the case. He's going up against the best receiver on the team and arguably one of the better receivers in the league. He's supposed to get beat, right? He's supposed to get beat because right now he's not on Terry's level. Maybe he'll get there in year 3 or year 4 of his career, but he's not there right now, okay? So Terry's a tough cover. He struggles with that, especially down the field. And so, every time he gets beat and Terry has a big catch, and it's not like he's getting beat like he stole something. A lot of times he's in great position. It's just a better ball, and Terry was able to get on top of him. That said, pause. That said, when he does something right, we need to make sure we talk about it. So it doesn't always create this narrative that he's constantly getting beat like a drum. So he had a nice PBU against De'Ami Brown and one-on-ones, and it's good to see him out there a lot. By all accounts, he looks a lot better, more confident, and assured of himself this year than he did at any point last season as a rookie. So I'm excited to see what that looks like against a different team. You know, practice is one thing. I want to see what that looks like against Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully, we won't see it in the preseason. Rodgers, they already said he's not playing in the preseason game against us, and probably won't play in the preseason at all. You know, after he got injured last year, they got him in bubble wrap, so you won't see him in any preseason games. So I don't, honestly, at this point, I don't even care who it's against. I just want to see him be confident. So if you're going up against the Jets' second team offense in the first preseason game and you're out there, then look like it. Like, dominate their, third, fourth, fifth receiver, whoever's in front of you, and their backup quarterback. Don't let that guy go out there and complete a bunch of passes in front of you and make a bunch of plays, right? So I just want to see that confidence transfer over to the field against, other competition, not his teammates. Mike Sainristil continuing to showcase his multitude of skills. Remember last week, head coach Dan Quinn talked about how well he and Kaz Allen performed on special teams, to the point where both of them kind of threw their name in the hat, like, hey, let me get some more reps on these kickoff and punt returns to show you what I can do to try to carve out a space for myself on this roster. If you're Kaz Allen, if you're Mike Sainristil, just another opportunity for me to maybe get my hands on the football. So he got reps on both punt and kickoff return, did Mike Sainristil, and had good hits on both in practice on Sunday. If I didn't know any better, I'd tell you that right now. So one of the conversations we're going to have tonight about the roster is Jamison Crowder. I saw his name in the comment section of the 53-man roster video that I put out last week on Friday. I saw his name come up a lot because I left him off of my 53-man roster. And I don't think he's going to make this team, just so we're clear. I'm not waffling off of that. But we're going to talk more about that tonight, but I think it's guys like Mike Sainristil and Olamide Zaccheaus that are going to make him expendable. If Sainristil is able to return punts, what purpose does Jamison Crowder serve at that point, right? If Olamide Zaccheaus is able to return punts, what point does Jamison Crowder serve, right? We're going to talk more about that tonight. But if Sainristil is able to return punts and kickoffs, that puts one or two guys potentially in danger, because a guy like Byron Pringle, his primary role for being brought here was, can you help us as a kick returner? If so, we know you can play receiver. We know you're a dynamic special teams player. So you check all the boxes, but we really brought you here so that you can help us on kickoffs. Well, if there's already a guy on the roster that's doing that, why do we need you, right? So Sainristil being really good and effective on both punts and kickoffs could be detrimental to other guys making this football team. It'll help them trim off some fat on this roster, but it also puts some of those guys who may be on the bubble, may force their bubbles to burst, so to speak. We'll see what happens. Kicking competition update. We're going to do this every single training camp practice. We're going to talk about these kickers because there's a chance that our week one kicker still isn't currently on the roster right now. I tend to think he is, right? One of these two kickers is going to be our kicker to start the season. I've already told you I think it's going to be Riley Patterson, but you just never know. The games are really going to tell the story here. If both of them wet the bed during the games, then they may have to scour the waiver wire. The beauty of kicking, right, the place kicking position in particular, is that you don't need training camp reps or practice or any of that stuff to do your job. So you can literally sign a guy the day before the season starts, and he can go out and kick for you, week one, and there's no issues. going out and getting a receiver or a guard or a corner who hasn't practiced, doesn't know the playbook, doesn't know the terminology, it makes it a little bit tougher to integrate someone with limited reps with the team. With kicker, if they're not satisfied with their kicking situation, this kicking competition could literally go all the way up until the third preseason game, and neither one of them could impress, and they could go, you know what? The Chargers just cut a kicker, or the Bengals just cut a kicker, or the Ravens just cut a kicker. Let's go sign that guy. He was 11 of 12 in the preseason. His longest was 57 in the preseason. The Ravens have the best kicker in NFL history on their team, so they're not going to cut that guy. So they're going to cut this kicker that went 11 of 12 and has been bombing them in preseason. Let's go get that guy instead. Like we're done with these two guys. That could ultimately happen, right? But we'll see. Ramiz Ahmed went 4 of 5 in practice on Sunday. Riley Patterson went 3 of 5. When is somebody going to go 5 of 5? Okay. I think the first day that Patterson came in, which I want to say was last Thursday, both kickers made all of their kicks, all 5 of them. And then since then, it was 4 or 5 for both of them on Friday's practice, and then 4 or 5 for Ramiz Ahmed on Sunday, and 3 or 5 for Riley Patterson. So if you're keeping score at home since the competition got underway, Ramiz Ahmed is 13 of 15. Riley Patterson is 12 of 15. Again, I think the preseason games are going to tell the story more so than the actual practices, but those are also being taken into account as well. Jayden Daniels had a touchdown run down the left sideline at practice. It was a significant run, showcased his athleticism and speed. It, however, was called back due to a penalty on the play. But it's just another example of what he can do and how dynamic he can be with the football in his hands. He's going to be a problem for opposing teams' defenses on called runs, but especially when the play breaks down, guys are in man coverage, their backs are turned, and he's able to tuck it and run with space and opportunity in front of him. He's going to be a tough guy to deal with. Bryson Tremaine and Mitchell Tinsley continue to apply pressure towards the back end of the receiver position. I think that 5 of the 6 receiver spots are spoken for. These two have been 2 of the more consistent names on the back end of the receiver group, making plays and continuing to stay in the consciousness of not only the fans, but also the coaching staff, continuing to give them things to think about. Bryson Tremaine with another big catch towards the end of practice, connecting with Marcus Mariota. Meanwhile, Mitchell Tinsley had a nice catch over the middle of the football field as he continues to try to make his case to make the team for the second consecutive season as an undrafted free agent. So we'll see what happens there. That was training camp day number 9 in a nutshell. And again, Jayden continues to grow, to flourish, to get more and more comfortable. This next week is going to be really big for his development, good or bad. And he talked about it. Speaking of which, we're about to get to Jayden Daniels and what he had to say at his press conference. But good or bad, it's going to be another, part of his development, another step in the process, if you will, for Jayden Daniels and this offense and this team as a whole, right? So Jayden Daniels stepped up to the podium, spoke for almost 10 minutes. He talked about a number of different topics. We'll go through the ones that I thought were pertinent. He's talked about his playing time in the preseason opener. So the preseason opener against the Jets, we weren't sure how they were going to handle the preseason, but I was pretty adamant that it would shock me if Jayden Daniels didn't play in the preseason, because everything is so limited and the quarterbacks can't be touched in any facet of practice. Joint practices, normal practices, doesn't matter. You can't touch the quarterback. You need to put him in settings where he's alive, where he is not off limits, where he can be hit. He needs to be in that environment where the game is fast, things are moving at a rapid rate of speed. He's got to still be able to process, and the threat of violence needs to be on him just like it is for everyone else on the field. So that was put to bed. We'll talk more about that when we get to DQ. But he acknowledged that he was playing in the preseason opener, and he's like, I just love to compete. I'm ready to get out there and kind of showcase my skills and seek the kind of growth that we've made as an offense. Can I just say, every time I listen to this kid talk, I am more and more impressed with him. I don't know what I was expecting. I didn't hear anything negative about him throughout the process. I heard nothing but good things about him, to be honest with you. But I didn't really know what to expect going into the process, once he was drafted here. But he is so impressive. He really, truly is. He gets it. He never makes it about himself. And what's also really good about him, and I think part of the reason why he's so humble, is because he wasn't this massive star in college. He was a highly sought after recruit at Arizona State and things of that nature, but he didn't really take off because I remember, I'm going to be honest with you. I thought Jayden Daniels stunk up until last year. I'm just keeping it a buck. I watched him at Arizona State. I watched him his first year at LSU. I thought he was trash. That's just how I felt about him. And then he had that one season last year, and I'm watching games, and I remember very vividly, this is the first time where I started to turn. Like, my perception of him started to shift. Me and my boys were out in South Beach. And you remember I had the video where, it was the Broncos game. And I was in the restaurant, the bar with my boys watching the game, and we got the win. And I'm screaming, let's get out of here for the, take the win back. We 2-0 and all that shit. We were out that weekend having some fun. And we were getting something to eat for breakfast. And LSU was playing Mississippi State. He went off that game. Him and the receiver for the Giants went off. Malik Neighbors in that game. Killed him. And Jayden, we were watching the game, and Jayden was throwing some dimes. And my boy was sitting next to me, and he was like, yo, that quarterback right there, that dude is nice. And I'm like, him? Jayden Daniels? Yeah, right. And I'm sitting there like, yo, this dude been in school for like 5 years. Dude is trash, whatever. And I'm watching him make plays, and I'm watching him run, and I'm watching him dropping in the bucket over and over again. And I'm like, damn, did he just get nice on me overnight or some shit? Like, I remember leaving that game saying, maybe I need to start paying more attention to what he's doing. Like, maybe I need to pay attention to more the growth and the maturation that's taking place with this kid. We need a quarterback. Like, we could need a quarterback. At that time, I was still all in on Sam Howell. So I wasn't as fixated on the quarterback position as I would be, 2 months later. But I was like, he's becoming interesting. And to see the growth over the course of that season and what he ultimately did, and then to hear him speak now, I've been thoroughly impressed with him, man. He is a good, and so to finish that point I was making, he didn't really, and he even stressed that in this press conference, because Ben Standing asked him, all these kids out here today, at what point did it, you start being hounded for autographs, people really, pursuing you for autographs, things of that nature. And he said, really, last year, at LSU, when he, was going down that Heisman Trophy path and having the success that they ultimately had last year, or he had individually, they didn't really have the kind of success they wanted to as a team, but the success he had individually and as an offense, obviously 3 of the players on that team got drafted in the first round. So it speaks volumes. He said that was the first time he really started to have that kind of celebrity as a quarterback. So I think that kind of lends itself to him being as humble as he is as well. Like, he wasn't always the, highly touted, big time, big man on campus QB that everybody wanted a piece of in high school and, college. And like, it didn't really happen for him until last year. So I think that kind of kept him centered and grounded too. Right. But he talked about his growing connection with Terry McLaurin. And I talked about this last week in terms of the more reps he gets with the first team offense. And we've seen that number of reps go through the roof here over the last 4 or 5 practices, where he started to take the lion's share of the first team reps. Marcus is getting some first team reps still, but the vast majority of the first team reps, pretty much all of them, are going to Jayden Daniels at this point. So he's getting more reps with Terry McLaurin, with Zach Ertz, with Jahan Dotson, with the guys that are going to be on that first team unit. And Terry in particular, we know the struggles that McLaurin has had with having, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different quarterbacks in his career that he's played with to this point. I don't know if he's ever had a season in which he didn't have multiple starters. Last year probably was the first, because even though Sam was being yo-yoed in and out of the lineup towards the end of the season, Sam started every game last season. Jacoby was supposed to start against the 49ers and then had this mysterious ailment that kept him out. But he talked about, the reps that they're getting, but he didn't even really specify Terry as much as he said just the offense in general. We just need to continue to get reps together, continue to grow, and grow in Cliff's system, and see what we can do. He talked about Bobby Wagner and the relationship that he has with him. He always lights up when he talks about Bobby Wagner because they came from the same neighborhood. He talked about that before in the press conference he had the last time about he and Bobby Wagner's relationship. And he said a lot of times when they speak, it's not even about football. It's usually about basketball, right? They talk about all kinds of different things. And then he also talked about, the competition between the two of them, Bobby being the starting middle linebacker, he being the starting quarterback, and how Bobby's like, yo, that would have been a sack on that play. And Jayden says, we just usually talking shit to one another. And I love that, just a small thing here, but I love that they're not blanking out the curse words on the press conferences this year. In past years, they would blank it. I'm like, come on now, what are we doing? They don't blank these things out on cable television anymore. What are we doing? Just leave it alone, right? Anyway, I guess if you got kids and you don't want them hearing curse words, I guess I get it. But anyway, he said a lot of times they talk shit to one another, but it's all in good fun. And every now and then Bobby will tell him, hey, I saw this or that. But he said a lot of times they ain't even football when they talking. So they got a really good relationship. He talked about the challenge in facing the Jets. Obviously, they have a really good secondary led by Sauce Gardner. They were 7th. They had the 7th most sacks last year in the league. So they're going to be different challenges facing them. But, all in all, you're just happy to go against a different unit. See different plays, see different things, guys with different level of talent going against your guys. And you want to see how you fare, right? The Jets are one of the best defenses in football. So this is going to be a really good test for a young offense that's trying to figure some things out. We're going to find out a lot about Brandon Coleman, and head coach Dan Quinn talked about that in his press conference. So looking forward to seeing what, a number of aspects of this team look like versus the New York Jets, hearing about it in the joint practices, obviously, and then, seeing what it looks like on the field in preseason game number 1. Jayden Daniels talked about the difference between college versus the NFL. And he said, 2 of the biggest things for him are the nuances that come with the NFL. Very detail oriented. You got to pay attention to the little things at the NFL level. He talked more specifically about situational football and how Dan Quinn has really pounded that into their heads about really understanding down and distance, time, how these things factor into your decision-making process. 4-minute offense, 2-minute offense. He's like, these are things that, they weren't as stressed in college because we didn't have, the running clock. You get a first down, the clock stops until they spot the ball, things of that nature. So you had plenty of time. Like 2 minutes is an eternity in college. 2 minutes is not an eternity in the NFL, right? 4 minutes is an eternity in college football. 4 minutes can be run out on one drive with 3 first downs if the other team doesn't have but one timeout remaining, right? So There's nuances. There's, little fine granular details. Like if we're in 4-minute offense and we call a rollout, like a bootleg, and there's a receiver in front of you, but it's tight coverage, and you can probably zing it in there, but you can tuck it and run and stay in bounds and get 8 yards. Do that instead of trying to force it to the receiver, because if it's incomplete, it stops the clock. Like, it's those little situational details that he's referring to. Like, these are the things that are being, really pounded into our heads about this is how you have to conduct business in certain situations. We know situationally we have not been the best team. We've been one of the worst, actually. It's something I've been complaining about since Rivera got here. So it's great to hear him talk about that, and DQ talked about it too. And then he talked about rule changes. Again, I just talked about a difference in college between the NFL, where the clock stops, under 5 minutes in college. Well, really, it stops with any first down in college, not under 5 minutes. Anytime you get a first down, they stop the clock to reset the sticks in college. So just little subtle changes like that you have to be on top of. 2 feet versus 1 foot in college, right? With receivers and things of that nature. You're not down if you aren't touched while you're on the ground. You can get up and run. Like, there's different rules in college that don't apply to the NFL. So you just want to be cognizant of those things. So he's talked about that as well. He talked about what he's looking for from his first experience playing against another team. And he pretty much said, I want to be able to go out, play, show what we've learned to this point. And as DQ talked about, you're probably not going to see a lot of the offense that we'll be running come week 1. They're not going to showcase what it is. They're going to try, be very vanilla, which you want them to be. Still want to see them execute in whatever it is that they're doing, however, but probably not going to see a lot from them in that regard. But he talked about wanting to get out there, be able to just cut it loose, make mistakes, and learn from them, right? Like, just don't go out there being afraid to make a play or make a mistake. Either way, I'm going to learn from it, right? If I'm able to pull something off, I'm like, okay, I know I can do that now. I know I can do that in this league. If it doesn't work, I may need to be a little bit more reserved when taking those type of risks. It's just a little bit different here. So, he wants to figure out what he can and can't get away with, and this is the perfect setting for that, right? He talked about his connection with Sam Hartman. Those two trained in California together, pre-draft. So there was already a working relationship between the two of them. And then, obviously, they're both rookies. They both play the same position. They're in the same quarterback room. So he talked about that, relationship, and then the relationship of all the guys, Jeff and Marcus, also in that quarterback room. He's like, it's a really good room, and they enjoy being in that room together. He talked about balancing taking a chance versus protecting himself. And he started to laugh on this particular question because you can tell, like, they're drilling into his head, yo, we need you healthy, bro. Please protect yourself. Because he took some hellacious shots at LSU. We all saw them. A lot of people were like, oh, my God, he's not going to last in the NFL if he's doing that. Because if he's taking those type of shots in the SEC, you can go ahead and times that by 4 at the NFL level. We saw Anthony Richardson, who is like 2 times bigger than Jayden Daniels, and I'm exaggerating, but he's a much bigger, thicker, physically built quarterback, and he didn't make it out of the first 6 weeks of the season last year before he was done, with a shoulder injury. And so, it's something to be said about quarterbacks like that, though, because those guys feel like they're indestructible. Josh Allen is another one of these guys that he makes me nervous because he's so big. He thinks he can do whatever the hell he wants. And, those are the guys that get broken up too, right? Whereas the guys that have that Gumby-like frame that's kind of wiry and bendable, like Jayden, somehow, like Lamar Jackson, for instance, is a great example. Those guys don't get hurt like that. If they get hurt, it's usually like soft tissue injuries or something like that. But those guys, they usually find ways to protect themselves. But he laughed because he's like, I'm a competitor. So I'm going to, try and go out and make a play, and I'm going to take more chances than they probably like me to. But they're stressing that I need to protect myself. So it's a balance. It's a fine line. He's like, I get out there and I see an opportunity and I think I can make it. I'm going to take a chance. But they want me to get out. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to have to figure that out. So I'm just like, bro, please figure that shit out. Okay. But at the same time, I love the fact that he wants to remain aggressive, because that's always been the thing that I've been preaching. Like, don't take his aggressiveness. Don't try to muzzle one of his superpowers, which is his ability to extend plays. Where he talked about where he feels like his game has grown, and he talked about, just the understanding of the offense, the playing the position, really, his growth in Cliff's scheme, but being able to get in and out of the huddle, being able to kind of read what the defense is doing, know where to go with the football, that sort of thing. Just getting really comfortable with what he's being asked to do. I think that's where he feels like he's grown the most. But you're going to really put that to the test starting this week, going up against the Jets and then the Dolphins the following week. He talked about establishing the run and being physical. He talked about them being a physical team and having to establish the run, which is something we did not do last season. That's well documented at this point. And he said, look, that's where the game is won and lost, is in the trenches. We want to be a physical team. We want to be the more dominant team in the trenches. And so he did talk about that. So one of the quotes early on, the day before camp started, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn had a press conference the day before camp started. And Adam Peters, during that press conference, in regards to Jayden Daniels and when he would be named QB1, made the following statement, quote, "We'll know when he's ready. He'll know when he's ready. And the team will know when he's ready." And so, close quote. And so at this point, the question was asked, do you feel like you're ready or not? And he's like, quote, "I still got some ways to go," close quote. So even now, going into his first, week of joint practices and his first NFL preseason action, he's like, "Nah, I still got ways to go." And that's great to hear. Again, that's that humble, demeanor that DQ has talked about with him, where he doesn't feel like he's arrived. Anytime you get a guy that feels like he's arrived, that's when you start running into problems. There's always growth. There's always, those types of things that can take place with a quarterback. You always want your guys to feel like, hey, I can get better today, right? You could be in year 13 and there's still things that you can work on to help you get better. You never want to hear your quarterback, or any player for that matter, talk about being, having arrived. You want guys that are constantly hungry, constantly chasing after something, constantly trying to get better. And he's like, yeah, no, I still got ways to go. Like, I'm not ready by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to use these preseason games, the rest of training camp, and these joint practices to really try to hone my skills, sharpen my skills, and get better. And so he talked about that, and he talked about going up against Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne and Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner and all these veterans on defense, and iron sharpens iron. So they're helping him get better and get ready and prepared for the start of the season. But he's not there yet, right? And so you like to hear that too. And then the last quote that I thought was really pertinent to close out his press conference. He talked about his days at ASU, and specifically something that his head coach at ASU, Herm Edwards, told him, former NFL head coach of the New York Jets, former NFL player for the Philadelphia Eagles, Herm Edwards. He said, "Coach Herm told me at Arizona State, if you want to play in the NFL, you got to take care of the football," close quote. So one of the things that Jayden Daniels has done really well throughout his career in college is he's taking care of the football. There's a very low turnover rate for him. Last year, he had that ridiculous, like 10 or 11 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio. He doesn't fumble it a ton. He accounted for over 50 touchdowns last year and only 4 interceptions and I think another 3 or 4 fumbles. So he doesn't turn the ball over very much, and that's something that stuck in his head as a young quarterback at Arizona State. I got to take care of the football. And if you look at his turnover numbers throughout his career, they're relatively low for a guy that has such a high usage rate. So he's a guy that is, traditionally taking care of the football. That's something that needs to continue at this level. And if it does, he's going to give us a chance. With the way I think we're going to play defense, with the weapons that he's going to be surrounded by, I think taking care of the football, playing quality defense, making timely plays, this team's going to have a chance to be in a bunch of ball games in year one, right? Will they win them? That's the thing that I get hung up on. I don't think they'll win a lot of them. They'll win some, but, that's a part of the process. But if he takes care of the ball and we're not turning it over a ton, I think we're going to generate turnovers this year, and it's going to give us a chance to win some ball games and be in some games that, normally or theoretically we wouldn't be in, and we would have gotten, our asses handed to us like we did last year in so many ball games where things got out of hand. So we go to head coach DQ's presser, and he started out his press conference talking about the mock game that they did on Saturday. So remember, there was practice. I don't want there to be confusion as to whether there was practice or not yesterday. There was practice yesterday or on Saturday, excuse me. So let's just make sure that that's clear. They did have practice. It just was not open to the media. It was more of a glorified walkthrough, though, but it was them working on situational things, them working on the nuances of an actual NFL game, getting those things down packed. Keep in mind, we got a lot of new faces within the staff now. And so, seeing things like this take place might have been, a collaborative idea, but you got guys that worked in the NFL front office that might be like, hey, I think it's a good idea if we rep these things with the players so that they know and it starts to stick. Like, these are the things that the officials look for. These are the things that you have to be cognizant of on game day. And so, like, this is awesome. I don't recall the last staff doing anything like this. Again, they may have, but I don't recall them doing things like this. And DQ, kind of expounded upon what this mock game entailed. And he talked about subbing guys in and out, getting those guys, you play against Aaron Rodgers, for instance. You got to be really quick with your subs. Guys got to get in and out because he'll try to get you with 11 men. He'll try to get you with 12 men on the field, right? So understanding, hey, we putting this package in, guys got to get in and out. So substitutions. He talked about game management, clock management, getting in and out of the huddle, getting the play calls in, different positional groups getting in there, different things like that. So they went through a lot of game situations, and not just on the field, but, things that will help them from a coaching standpoint, right? And also with the players. So I thought that was pretty cool to hear them doing that, right? DQ explained the Taylor Stallworth signing. Essentially, he talked about load management for Johnny Newton and John Allen in particular. Allen's getting up there in age, and he dealt with some injuries last year, so you want to keep him as fresh as possible. Johnny Newton, obviously coming off of not 1, but 2 foot surgeries, both feet having a surgery done to them this year. So one in January and another one in May, I believe it was. So you want to be very cognizant of that. So he's like, yeah, we brought in, because, one of the things that I found interesting upon this signing was people were, fans were freaking out. Well, I thought the defensive tackle position was one of our deeper positions. What do we need this guy for? And I'm like, chill, bro, chill. Like, it was a lot of that going on. And so DQ explaining why this guy was brought in here. It's not because they don't like what they have at the position. It's because they want to take some, and same thing I said about, how you look at a quarterback being brought in as a camp arm. This is pretty much the same deal here, right? Taylor Stallworth isn't going to make this team, but he could impress them and he could end up on their practice squad. Who knows, right? DQ talked about quarterback wide receiver synchronicity and the importance of it and what it looks like when it's, at a high level. And the first thing that entered my mind when the question was asked was Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Julio! I figured he'd go to that example because that was the best example he had been around. And sure enough, he said, yeah, it's really fun to watch when, the quarterback and the receiver are in lockstep like that. He said, I had one of the best, and the best example I've ever seen was of Julio Jones and Matt Ryan. He's like, every route doesn't look the same when the two are in sync. So for Julio, a slant might look different with him and Matt. The deep ball might look different. It might be put in a different place because of his skill set and the continuity the two have. You see it all the time with a guy like Aaron Rodgers when he was with Devontae Adams. He'd look at Devontae and they'd know, all right, we're going to run back shoulder fade here. Run 18 yards up the field, come back down the stem at 15, and I'm going to hit you on the back shoulder. Or, run down the field and I'm going to just put it on your back shoulder and you just turn around and catch it. The defender won't even know what hit him, right? When you got that kind of continuity between two guys, he said you could just look, the two can just look at each other and they know, right? And so that's kind of where you want Terry to eventually. Remember, Terry mentioned that on the Pivot podcast last year, where he wants to be able to have a relationship with a quarterback where you can look at the corner in front of him, see that the safety is cheating over to the other side or trying to disguise. Ain't no way he gonna get back to be able to double team me in enough time. Hey, we got one-on-one, bro. Let's do it, right? Terry's supposed to be running a 7-yard stop, a hitch. Hey, let's hook this thing up, take it uptown, bro. Like, I got one-on-one. Let's just go deep and see what we got, right? So you want to be able to get to a place like that. So he's like, it's important to get those reps in so that you can get to a place where that kind of connection, that kind of communication and understanding exists, and then the ball placement becomes paramount there. And again, all of that stuff comes with more reps. Skill work versus processing work with Jayden. He talked about, being able to make certain throws, the repetition of throwing the underneath drag, the shallow cross, being able to throw the swing route out of the backfield to the running back, being able to throw the deep ball down the field. That's skill work, right? Repetitions, doing something over there. We've seen him be extremely accurate with the football in drills and, been accurate in practices and things of that nature. He said that's the skill work aspect. But then there's the processing aspect, knowing where to go with the football, dropping back, seeing what the defense is doing and knowing exactly where the football needs to go. Or, hey, they got us beat on this play. Let me check it down. Or let me take off and run. Understanding what's being done in front of you, understanding how fast you need to go through your reads. That's not there. That's not there. Here's the third option. Let me get it to him. Processing is a whole different animal. And he said Jayden has really exceeded their expectations in that processing department. They kind of knew what they were getting themselves into from a skill work standpoint, like his ability to be accurate, put the ball where it needs to be. That's how he won the Heisman Trophy. But they've been super impressed with his ability to process what is going on and just to play the position. Overall, they've been really pleased with his growth there as well. He talked about what they're going to look for in this preseason game, but more importantly, the joint practices with the Jets. And he talked about, just getting that work, man, just being able to see specific position groups go against the other team's position groups. He said the beauty of, and this, we've heard this before, John Kahn talked about this, others have talked about this, where the significance of joint practices sometimes, in many instances, outweigh the preseason game itself, because you can script what happens. Like DQ talked about, he said, I can't wait to see what Brandon Coleman does against the Jets. Like, that was the person he singled out. Like, they really want to see what this young kid can do because he's been so impressive here of late. But yeah, it's against our guys. Let's see what it looks like against their guys. And he can go over to Robert Saleh. He talked about Brick and Nathaniel Hackett, and who's the offensive coordinator. They can go over there to those guys and say, hey, we want to get a little one-on-one session in real quick, or we want to get some 2-minute work in, or we want to get some red zone in. And if they're like, yeah, cool, let's do it, then boom, you're able to script that and get all of that stuff done. So you get to see your guys in specific instances, whereas a game, if it doesn't come up, it doesn't come up. You might not get the football in a 2-minute situation. So you may not get to work 2 minutes. You may not be in a 4-minute offensive situation. You might not have the football in a 4-minute. You might not have the lead in a 4-minute situation, right? So you may not get to rep that in practice. You may not get to see what it looks like in the red zone. You might not make it to the red zone the entire game. So you don't get to work on red zone offense, right? So the practices allow you to work on specific things against a different group with them going hard. They're not taking it easy on you because they're not your friends. They are not your teammates. And I'm going to also go out on a limb and say I'll be shocked if there's not one little skirmish during this joint practice where shit gets heated because somebody felt like a dude was too aggressive with him or something like that. I expect at least one or two. The Jets are a physical, nasty team. I expect this to get sideways at least once or twice, right? Jayden obviously will play against the Jets, but that question was specifically asked during the presser by Chick Hernandez. I'm glad he asked because everybody's kind of dancing around it. Nobody wanted to ask. Chick was like, yo, he playing or what? He's like, yeah, no, he playing. Now, he didn't ask him, is he starting? But we all assume you're not going to put Jayden Daniels out there in the second quarter, right? He's going to play. He's going to start this game, right? So DQ talked about the QB room, but specifically Sam Hartman and Jayden Daniels and their relationship. And he used the analogy of going to school for the first time. And I think it's a great analogy because I think we've all experienced this, some to varying different degrees. I know, going to high school, it was more important for me in high school, maybe even middle school too, because middle school was more of a culture shock for me. I went to a very, small elementary school, tight knit. Everybody knew everybody. And in middle school, they opened up the floodgates, and I met so many different people and it was a culture shock. And it was so good to be able to go to middle school with people that I knew from elementary school or from playing sports with, so that I saw familiar faces and it made it more comfortable. And he kind of likened it to that, right? So, them having a relationship has definitely helped. And then he talked about Sam Hartman and, they really appreciate him, kind of assimilating himself to the role that he has kind of fallen into with this team. Obviously, when you're the third string quarterback, you're not getting a ton of reps. And DQ was like, yo, it's tough to go from getting all the reps at Wake Forest, all the reps at Notre Dame to now you're not getting hardly any reps. And when they need somebody to throw to this position group or that position group or here, or throw a little bit more after practice here, Sam's always volunteering. He's always stepping up, and they appreciate that. So he talked about that as well. DQ talked about Nick Allegretti in particular and what he's seen from him. I love Nick Allegretti. There was an interview done by Craig Hoffman. He's done a great job of grabbing players, pulling them aside, and getting anywhere from a 7 to 10 minute interview with them post practice. He did one with Frankie Louie. He did one with Nick Allegretti. He's done some with several players. The Nick Allegretti, Frankie Louie, I think and Bobby Wagner. I think he grabbed Wagner too. Those have all been, especially Allegretti. His was so enlightening. I learned so much about him and, how he kind of goes about business. And Allegretti is a really likable dude. And I think he's going to really fit in because like Jayden Daniels, all he talks about is competition. I remember the first thing he said when he got here, and it kind of stuck out to me, is he said, I want that left guard job bad. I came here specifically because there was an opening there and I want it. I didn't ask them to give me any reassurances. I didn't ask them to give me any guarantees. I want to come in here and I want to earn that left spot job. That's all I want. And he talked about in that interview with Craig Hoffman, this camp being a little bit different because when he's in Kansas City, he was a utility man. He was not a starter. So they would play him all up and down the offensive line, left and right guard, center. And so he was never able to get really comfortable at any position because they would always be moving him around because they knew in a pinch if something happened in a game, he'd be the first guy really off the bench on any of the interior offensive lineman positions. So he said that created balance throughout his body because when you rep at left guard, you're using different movement skills, different side of the body. When you rep at right guard, you're using the opposite side of your body and you're repping it that way. And then when you play center, you're square. You're doing both, right? He's saying now he's really happy that he's just getting to rep a lot of the left guard position, but it's also forcing him to have to find ways to create balance because now everything's on that left side. Whereas before I'm playing left, I'm playing right, I'm playing center. So I'm balanced. So DQ talked about Allegretti and the communication that he's brought from Kansas City, the leadership that he's brought, and he's just been a stabilizing force. Remember, he's a starter, right? Like DQ made it abundantly clear last week. He's, a lot of people looked at Biotish and Cosme as the two guys that had solidified spots on the offensive line. I told you the biggest thing that I gained from that day's particular presser was DQ said, no. Nick's in that conversation too. All right, when you talk about guys that have solidified their spot on the offensive line, the interior is set. From guard to guard is set. We're just trying to figure out the two tackle positions, and really, right tackle's pretty much spoken for at this point with Andrew Wiley too. It's really just left tackle with Brandon Coleman at this point. So he's like, yeah, I've really been impressed with Nick Allegretti, especially his communication and his leadership. I really feel like he's going to be another one of those guys that provides like sort of a stabilizing force on that offensive line. He's done a great job working in unison with Brandon. He's done a really good job of working in unison with Tyler. Nick Allegretti is, I think, going to be. He's given me a lot of a guy that I really liked here over the last 3 years prior to last year. He went to the Jets last year. What was the name of the guy we got from the Falcons that I really liked? That he was like our first guy off the bench, and he started a bunch of games for us too over the life of his 3-year contract here. I can't think of his name right now, but he played really well for us. Wes Schweitzer, that's his name. I really, I was a big Wes Schweitzer fan. He gives me Wes Schweitzer vibes. That's Nick Allegretti. I think he's going to be a really good signing for us. He talked about optimal workload, did DQ, and I thought this was interesting. And again, this is why I think this, when I keep telling you it feels different because it is different. I'm talking about stuff like this. Optimal workload. They bring in Taylor Stallworth to take some of the workload off of a guy that they just brought back from injury. Unlike the situation with Curtis Samuel his first year where Ron and company botched it, had Curtis out there all the goddamn time, and every time he come back, he get injured again. Every time he come back, he get injured again. He could never get his footing because they rushed him back, right? Well, they're not going to do that with Johnny Newton, clearly. They're looking to take some off his plate. Same with John Allen. So they bring a guy in to take. But he talked about optimal workload, and he went into specifics or certain positions, like corner, for instance. He said that's a position where you need to run a lot. And so if you have practice and you only have 5 reps as a corner, probably going to need to get some more running in post-practice because you need to keep that conditioning at an optimal level. He's like, conversely, if you are out there and you're Emmanuel Forbes and Terry's running, 50 million go balls and deep posts and things of that nature, and you've been running all practice, we probably need to scale you back next practice. You don't need to be taking all of those reps. You do need to be scaled back a little bit, right? And he talked about, how you do that for all of the positions, and, age comes into factor. Like we just talked about with Jonathan Allen. Bobby Wagner's another guy that you look at, you say, hey, we don't need to be putting a lot of tread on his tires. At the end of the day, he's already got enough experience. So we don't need to overwork him. And then he's like, a lot of times with these injuries, they're soft tissue injuries. So it's a matter of managing workload. And, that's music to our ears because I'm not gonna hold you, and I don't really want to talk about this a lot because this could go off the rails quickly. But I'm looking around the league, man. It's a lot of injuries taking place. I'm gonna just leave it at that. But here, I'm gonna just leave it at that. And I think it's because they got a really good grasp. For the first time, this organization seems to have a really good grasp of analytics, what the data says, how to read the data, and how to interpret it and then execute based off of the data, right? How to keep guys upright and not dealing with a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm going to leave it right there. New school versus old school practice habits. DQ talked a lot about the old way of going about things, the 2-a-days, the tough training camp practices, that sort of thing, versus, the same thing I just kind of talked about, optimal workload and, when is enough, when is too much, sort of, going, he's like, there's a fine line and a balance, and you got to be able to do both. He's like, you need the hard, right? He's like, you can't try to go about this by, cutting corners and making it everything easy for the players. You have to have hard because football is hard. The season is hard. Conditioning is hard. You need hard. But he's like, you also need to be able to scale back to keep guys healthy, to make sure that when the season starts, and I'm big on this. I talk about this every year. I just want to get to the starting blocks with all of my horses lined up, ready to go. Once they open the gates and they say, and they're off, then whatever happens, it's just a part of the game, and it is what it is. But just let me get to Tampa week 1 with all of my stuff. Just let me get there. And then whatever happens after that. All right. You adjust accordingly. Let me just get to week 1 with all my stuff. And that's what DQ pretty much said. This is a great quote from him that aligns with this particular question he was asked. He says, I tell the players, you manage the focus, I'll manage the reps, right? And essentially what he's saying is, you go as hard as you can for the amount of reps that you're out there. You just lock in and you focus on whatever it is we ask you to do, and I'll manage how often we ask you to do it, okay? But I want 110 from you every time we put you out there on the field, and I'll manage how many times I ask you to go 110%. But you just do me a favor. You handle yours, and I'm going to handle mine. I'm going to take care of you. As a player, you probably can't ask for it any better than that. Okay? He talked about Jayden's process versus playing the Jets. Jayden's process and him playing versus the Jets. And how this has all been a part of the process for him. They always were going to play him in the preseason. So we've been having this discussion after the Joe Theismann thing with Craig Hoffman. That had become a big topic of discussion, whether you play him or not. And I always felt like they would be remiss if they didn't play him in the preseason. I'm not telling you have to play him a lot. And he even said he's not going to play a ton, right? And you're not even going to see a lot of the stuff that we've been working on, the stuff that we've been installing. You're not even going to see a lot of that stuff, which we don't expect to. But I just think he needs to be in that setting. He's a rookie. He needs to be in that setting. If he were an 8-year vet, if he's Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, you probably don't need to put him out there. If you feel comfortable about where they are in the process, then you don't put him out there. But he's not those guys. He's a rookie. He should be out there. He should play in the preseason. And he will. DQ was asked, where has the most growth taken place in this team since the start of training camp happened? Like, where have you seen the most growth take place? His answer was in 3 different places, but the biggest one for him was situational awareness. Wait, what? That's a buzz phrase for me, right? Situational awareness. Have I not been bitching and complaining, damn near crying about situational awareness for the last 4 years, specifically with Scott Turner? Like, that was my favorite phrase to use with Scott Turner in terms of his biggest deficiency, is he lacked any situational awareness. To hear Dan Quinn talk about, yeah, I've seen a lot of growth with this team from a situational awareness standpoint. My ears perked up. My eyes got big. I was like, wait, what? Let's hope that bleeds over into the regular season. He talked about communication. That's something he's been big on since day one. I need to hear them before I see them. I need communication to be key. Joe Witt Jr. talked about being a chatty defense. We need communication. That's something that he stressed. He said it's gotten better. He wants more of it, but it's definitely improved since the start of camp. And he talked about the installation. He said we're probably about 75 to 85% installed in terms of our offense and defense. So installation has grown. We're at a good point now. We're almost fully installed and ready to rock. So he talked about those three different things being where he's seen the most growth with the team. And then he talked about two players to finish up, Ben Sinnott and then Johnny Newton. So with Ben Sinnott, he talked about him being physical in the run game, knowing that that was going to be like a part of his game that he felt like Ben would be really good at immediately. Like they loved Ben Sinnott, the blocker at K-State. They knew he could catch the ball and he was an athlete and all of that stuff. But the thing that he's been most surprised with Ben is his ability to make the contested catch. He said, you know, a lot of times the young players come in here, when you're in college, you're wide open, you know, the windows are a lot bigger. And so, sometimes you don't see enough of those contested catches in college to know if that's something that they can consistently do. But with Ben, we've seen a lot of, contested catches early on in camp. So we know he's capable of doing that. That's a twofold response for me, because on one end, does that mean you're not creating a lot of separation? And so you have to make tight window catches and contested catches, or you could be just sitting down in zone and the zone collapses and you have to make a tough catch. That happens all the time in the NFL. Whatever the case may be, it's good to know that his hands are A1 in any situation, to contested or wide open. And he's like, and he's been an excellent blocker in the run game along with Bates. So they've been really pleased with those two guys' physicality in the run game. And then he's like, hey, Ben really showed me the ability to catch the football in traffic. And then Johnny Newton, he talked about his speed has been the thing that has stuck out to them the most. He's like, Johnny Newton plays with the speed of a defensive end in a defensive tackle's body. That gets Dan Quinn excited, because oftentimes he trades size for speed, which is why Dallas got run on, which is why the Falcons, when he was in Atlanta, would get run on, because he would often trade size for speed. Like he wants guys that are explosive and dynamic up front, because that's what's going to give the offensive line fits in front of them. Is when guys are fast, they're quick twitch, they're moving around and they're coming at you in waves. It's hard to stop that from penetrating into the backfield and making plays and applying pressure to the quarterback and stopping the running back for tackles for loss and things of that nature, when you got guys that are faster than the offensive lineman in front of them. So when you are able to put that kind of speed and athleticism in a frame that allows you to still stop the run, you get the best of both worlds, which is why I think DQ feels like, hey, I don't really worry about the defensive ends as much. I can figure that shit out. I'll generate pressure. But you give me Allen, Payne, and now Newton, I can stop the run and get after the quarterback. This is heaven for him, right? But he talked about Newton in particular, having the speed of a defensive end. He's like, I watched him chase Marcus Mariota down on the sideline one time, and then I seen him running with a tight end down the field, right? And he's like, this dude is ridiculously fast for his size. So DQ is really, you could tell he's really stoked about Johnny Newton. And that's why you bring in a Taylor Stallworth, because they're like, we need this dude. When the season starts, we need 95 on the field along with 93 and 94. We want all three of those dudes healthy and rearing to go. We want no limitations on any of them. So let's try to cut back his reps and keep him where he needs to be. Let's not overwork him, because we don't want any setbacks. We want this guy raring to go week 1 against Tampa and moving forward. So that was essentially day number 10 and the 2 press conferences that we got on Sunday. So with that, I won't hold you here too much longer. I got one comment. I'm going to read that and then we'll get out of here. Remember, we'll be live tonight. I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to be active today. LouieTeeNetwork podcast here in the next hour or so, about 5 o'clock, 5:15, somewhere in that neighborhood. We'll have a LouieTeeNetwork podcast. And then later on tonight, probably like 10 o'clock, because I did tell somebody I would do a stream with them. My guy Tone, shout out to my guy Protect Sports. I'm supposed to be jumping on his channel at 9 tonight for about 30 minutes to an hour. And then once that's done, I'll just need 5 or 10 minutes to set up my stream, get on, and then we'll be talking about the 53-man roster later on tonight. So I'll be active today and really moving forward. You already know. It's August now. It's go time. All right. We got preseason football on Thursday, preseason football on Friday. Our guys get after it on Saturday, and we'll probably be live for probably a long time on Saturday, because I think that game is at noon, if I'm not mistaken, which is a weird time. Normally, our preseason games are at night, 7 o'clock, 7:30, that sort of thing. I think this game is actually at noon in New Jersey with the Jets. If that is in fact the case, then, that game will be over around 3 o'clock-ish, give or take. And at that point, we'll be live probably for the next 2-3 hours talking about the game, what we saw. And the beauty of the preseason is, even when the starters come out and the level of, engagement kind of wanes a bit, once you start seeing these guys that, won't make the team, you start. But there's going to be some guys worked in those groups, towards the back end of the game that you're like, hey, you need to watch out for this dude or that guy. So we'll have a lot to discuss, with the Jets preseason game. So looking forward to doing all of that. But Sean Moore, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. And I got a few shout outs that I got to give too. So I'll do that right after we get to Sean Moore's comment. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Sean writes, what's up, bro? I know I'm a bit late. Nah, you right on time, bro. But did you just call me a jive turkey? Jive turkey is a little over the line, my man. I don't know if I called you a jive turkey or not. I doubt that I called you a jive turkey in particular. But I did use that phrase a couple of times in past videos. So if the shoe fits, I always tell y'all, and I'm very specific when I tell y'all this, if I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you. If I'm not talking to you, then I'm not talking to you. You have nothing to worry about. But I did throw that jive turkey phrase out there. Somebody said, hey, what are you, 80 years old, bro? One of my favorite lines is from a movie called Trading Places, where Eddie Murphy's in jail. And he's out there acting crazy in jail, trying to keep dudes off of him and make himself, seem tough. And the two big dudes in the jail, one of them his only line is, yeah, right? So the other guy, the other big guy is like, it ain't cool being a jive turkey this close to Thanksgiving. And the other dude goes, yeah. So I don't know why I like saying jive turkey. It's a funny word. When they used to say it on Good Times or any of those 70s shows, it always used to make me laugh. What the hell is a jive turkey? That's so funny. But anyway, I digress. I don't think I called you a jive turkey, Sean, but I might have. Hey, you might have been lumped into a group that was labeled as a jive turkey. I don't think I called you a jive turkey. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Excuse me. King of the Bluegrass writes, things are coming together, Pepper. That they are. Things are coming together quite nicely. All right. And it feels like this well-crafted plan, but the execution is the key, right? We could talk about how well the plan has been crafted, this, that, and the third, but slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit. They're going into the proper slots. You're feeling really good about what's being done here and how it's being done. I think more importantly for me is how things are being done. not just what they're doing, because what they're doing, it's important. And, even the mock game, on Saturday, rather, is different. But it's not just what they're doing, it's how they're going about it that makes you go, this is different. This is really, really different. And so it feels like we're getting all the ingredients and we're starting to, put some of the spices in the pot, and we're mixing it up and we're tasting it to see if it tastes right before we start cooking everything else. Got to get that water right? And it's not quite there yet. You're getting close. You're tasting it, you're like, something's missing, right? But we're getting close. And we got all the ingredients here. And so once we get everything just right, look out, right? Feels really good. Feels good. Anyway, I digress. This is going to be a fun season. I can't stress this enough. I've been adamant telling you guys this. I'm going to enjoy this season. There'll be ups, there'll be downs. It's going to be a roller coaster ride at times. I could see us going on a 3-game win streak. I could see us going on a 4-game losing streak, and all of those games would be in losses by a touchdown or less, and they're nail biters, and we just didn't pull them out. I could see us winning 3 or 4 and going on runs like it's going to be a fun season. And I think when it's all said and done, we're going to walk away from this season feeling like that was the beginning of something big. That's what I get the sense of right now. But once again, we'll see, right? I digress. I look forward, hopefully, to seeing a lot of you later on tonight. I got a lot to say about the roster. I want to read a lot of your comments because, again, a lot of your comments were very thought-provoking. They were interesting. Even if I don't agree, I told you, this is what I like. I like dialogue. Even if I don't agree with your takes, that's what this brand has been cultivated to do, is to make everybody's voice be important, right? And to have this dialogue and to create this environment where we can agree to disagree. But nonetheless, I want to have that discussion tonight among other topics. So we'll be back later on tonight to talk 53-man roster, to react to a lot of your comments, and maybe even some of the comments from the episode 4 of the Commander's Log as well, the video that I put out on Saturday. So we'll do some of everything tonight, but we'll really be honing in on the 53-man roster as we head into joint practices in the preseason. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Training Camp Confidential with the Washington Commanders. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. If you haven't already done so, please do me a huge favor on the way out. Hit the like button. Over 330 of you out there, only 138 likes. We can do so much better. Please hit the like button if you haven't already done so. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, what are you waiting on? More great content in store. Hit the like button. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. With that said, y'all get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Hopefully you come kick it with me for the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. If not, no worries. I'll see you later on tonight, hopefully, for the Command Post Live. Until then, you guys take care. God bless. Good day.